Hello there. So I recognized a couple of names who got on first today, and I thank you very much for coming. And I thank everyone for coming. My name is Gildart, and since the beginning of the coronavirus lockdown, I've been reading classic old books to you in front of the fire in the hope that it'll bring a little companionship and entertainment, old-time entertainment, to your day. And I'm thrilled that you join me, and I very much enjoy doing this. So much so that I'm starting a new book tomorrow. It is The Inimitable Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse, and we will start at 5 Pacific on Instagram at Fireside Reading. All the chapters will then be uploaded to the Fireside Reading channel on YouTube. But most importantly, today we have the final few chapters of The Awakening by Kate Chopin. This was written in 1899. It's a beautiful book, and it's very subtle. I've really enjoyed reading it. At times, I've been surprised at how difficult it is to read because it's so ambiguous. But it really has been a joy to read. And where we are in the story is that Mrs. Pontellier, Edna, our heroine, fell in love early on with Robert. He went away to Mexico. He came back. We're not sure why he went, but in the last chapter that we read, we discovered why he went. He did, as we thought, fall in love with her as she fell in love with him, but because she was an older married woman, he thought there was no hope. But he returned because he was desperately in love with her and didn't really know what he was going to do. But it turned out that in the final chapter, he professed his love for her. She has, in the interim, moved away from her husband, Mr. Pontellier. And right at the end of the chapter, it seems like they will be able to have the love affair that they've both been so desperate to have. She gets called away to the house of her friend, Madame Ratignolle, because her friend is ill. She's being visited by the doctor, Dr. Mandelet, who is the same doctor that Edna's husband went to consult about Edna's strange behavior. And we ended the final chapter that we read with Robert and Edna embracing, and Edna saying, "I shall come back as soon as I can. I shall find you here." So, welcome to a fireside reading of the last few chapters of The Awakening. Chapter 37. Edna looked in at the drugstore. Monsieur Ratignolle was putting up a mixture himself, very carefully, dropping a red liquid into a tiny glass. He was grateful to Edna for having come. Her presence would be a comfort to his wife. Madame Ratignolle's sister, who had always been with her at such trying times, had not been able to come up from the plantation, and Adele had been inconsolable until Mrs. Pontellier so kindly promised to come to her. The nurse had been with them at night for the past week, as she lived a great distance away. And Dr. Mandelet had been coming and going all the afternoon. They were then looking for him any moment. Edna hastened upstairs by a private stairway that led from the rear of the store to the apartments above. The children were all sleeping in a back room. Madame Ratignolle was in the salon, whither she had strayed in her suffering impatience. She sat on the sofa, clad in an ample white peignoir, holding a handkerchief tight in her hand with a nervous clutch. Her face was drawn and pinched, her sweet blue eyes haggard and unnatural. All her beautiful hair had been drawn back and plaited. It lay in a long braid on the sofa pillow, coiled like a golden serpent. The nurse, a comfortable-looking grief woman in white apron and cap, was urging her to return to her bedroom. "There is no use. There is no use," she said at once to Edna. "We must get rid of Mandelet. He is getting too old and careless. He said he would be here at 7:30. Now it must be 8. See what time it is, Josephine." The woman was possessed of a cheerful nature and refused to take any situation too seriously, especially a situation with which she was so familiar. She urged Madame to have courage and patience, but Madame only set her teeth hard into her upper lip, and Edna saw the sweat gather in beads on her white forehead. After a moment or two, she uttered a profound sigh and wiped her face with the handkerchief rolled in a ball. She appeared exhausted. The nurse gave her a fresh handkerchief sprinkled with cologne water. "This is too much," she cried. "Mandelet ought to be here. Where is Alphonse? Is it possible I am to be abandoned like this, neglected by everyone?" "Neglected indeed," exclaimed the nurse. "Wasn't she there? And here was Mrs. Pontellier leaving, no doubt, a pleasant evening at home to devote to her. And wasn't Monsieur Ratignolle coming that very instant through the hall? And Josephine was quite sure she had heard Dr. Mandelet's coupé. Yes, there it was, down at the door." Adèle consented to go back to her room. She sat on the edge of a little low couch next to her bed. Dr. Mandelet paid no attention to Madame Ratignolle's upbraidings. He was accustomed to them at such times, and was too well convinced of her loyalty to doubt it. He was glad to see Edna, and wanted her to go with him into the salon and entertain him, but Madame Ratignolle would not consent that Edna should leave her for an instant. Between agonizing moments, she chatted a little and said it took her mind off her sufferings. Edna began to feel uneasy. She was seized with a vague dread. Her own like experiences seemed far away, unreal, and only half remembered. She recalled faintly an ecstasy of pain, the heavy odor of chloroform, a stupor which had deadened sensation, and an awakening to find a little new life to which she had given being, added to the great unnumbered multitude of souls that come and go. She began to wish she had not come. Her presence was not necessary. She might have invented a pretext for staying away. She might even invent a pretext now for going, but Edna did not go. With an inward agony, with a flaming, outspoken revolt against the ways of nature, she witnessed the scene of torture. She was still stunned and speechless with emotion when later she leaned over her friend to kiss her and softly say goodbye. Adèle, pressing her cheek, whispered in an exhausted voice, "Think of the children, Edna. Oh, think of the children. Remember them." Chapter 38. Edna still felt dazed when she got outside in the open air. The doctor's coupé had returned for him and stood before the porte cochère. She did not wish to enter the coupé and told Dr. Mandelet she could walk. She was not afraid and would go alone. He directed his carriage to meet him at Mrs. Pontellier's, and he started to walk home with her. Up Away up over the narrow street, between the tall houses, the stars were blazing. The air was mild and caressing, but cool with the breath of spring and the night. They walked slowly, the doctor with a heavy, measured tread and his hands behind him. Edna, in an absent-minded way, as she had walked one night at Grand Isle, as if her thoughts had gone ahead of her and she was striving to overtake them. "You shouldn't have been there, Mrs. Pontellier," he said. "That was no place for you. Adele is full of whims at such times. There were a dozen women she might have had with her, unimpressionable women. I felt that it was cruel. You shouldn't have gone." "Oh, well," she answered indifferently. "I don't know that it matters after all. One has to think of the children sometime or other. The sooner the better." "When is Léonce coming back?" "Quite soon. Sometime in March." "And you are going abroad?" "Perhaps." "No, I am not going. I'm not going to be forced into doing things. I don't want to go abroad. I want to be let alone. Nobody has any right, except children, perhaps, and even then it seems to me, or it did seem." She felt that her speech was voicing the incoherency of her thoughts and stopped abruptly. "The trouble is," sighed the doctor, grasping her meaning intuitively, "that youth is given up to illusions. It seems to be a provision of nature, a decoy to secure mothers for the race. And nature takes no account of moral consequences, of arbitrary conditions which we create and which we feel obliged to maintain at any cost." "Yes," she said. "The years that are gone seem like dreams. If one might go on sleeping and dreaming, but to wake up and find, oh, well, perhaps it is better to wake up after all, even to suffer, rather than to remain a dupe to illusions all one's life." "Seems to me, my dear child," said the doctor at parting, holding her hand, "you seem to me to be in trouble. I'm not going to ask for your confidence. I will only say that if ever you feel moved to give it to me, perhaps I might help you. I know I would understand, and I tell you, there are not many who would. Not many, my dear." "Some way I don't feel moved to speak of things that trouble me. Don't think I'm ungrateful or that I don't appreciate your sympathy. There are periods of despondency and suffering which take possession of me, but I don't want anything but my own way. That is wanting a good deal, of course, when you have to trample upon the lives, the hearts, the prejudices of others. But no matter, still I shouldn't want to trample upon the little lives. Oh, I don't know what I'm saying, Doctor. Good night. Don't blame me for anything." "Yes, I will blame you if you don't come and see me soon. We will talk of things you never have dreamt of talking about before. It will do us both good. I don't want you to blame yourself, whatever comes. Good night, my child." She let herself in at the gate, but instead of entering, she sat upon the step of the porch. The night was quiet and soothing. All the tearing emotion of the last few hours seemed to fall away from her like a somber, uncomfortable garment which she had but to loosen to be rid of. She went back to that hour before Adele had sent for her, and her senses kindled afresh in thinking of Robert's words, the pressure of his arms, and the feeling of his lips upon her own. She could picture at that moment no greater bliss on earth than possession of the beloved one. His expression of love had already given him to her in part. When she thought that he was there, at hand, waiting for her, she grew numb with the intoxication of expectancy. It was so late, he would be asleep perhaps. She would awaken him with a kiss. She hoped he would be asleep that she might arouse him with her caresses. Still, she remembered Adele's voice whispering, "Think of the children. Think of them." She meant to think of them. That determination had driven into her soul like a death wound. But not tonight. Tomorrow would be time to think of everything. Robert was not waiting for her in the little parlor. He was nowhere at hand. The house was empty. But he had scrawled on a piece of paper that lay in the lamplight, "I love you. Goodbye. Because I love you." Edna grew faint when she read the words. She went and sat on the sofa. Then she stretched herself out there, never uttering a sound. She did not sleep. She did not go to bed. The lamp sputtered and went out. She was still awake in the morning when Celestine unlocked the kitchen door and came in to light the fire. Chapter 39. Victor, with hammer and nails and scraps of scantling, was patching a corner of one of the galleries. Mariquita sat near her, dangling her legs, watching him work and handing him nails from the toolbox. The sun was beating down upon them. The girl had covered her head with her apron folded into a square pad. They had been talking for an hour or more. She was never tired of hearing Victor describe the dinner at Mrs. Pontellier's. He exaggerated every detail, making it appear a veritable Lucullian feast. The flowers were in tubs, he said. The champagne was quaffed from huge golden goblets. Venus rising from the foam could have presented no more entrancing a spectacle than Mrs. Pontellier, blazing with beauty and diamonds at the head of the board, while the other women were all of them youthful houris, possessed of incomparable charms. She got it into her head that Victor was in love with Mrs. Pontellier, and he gave her evasive answers framed so as to confirm her belief. She grew sullen and cried a little, threatening to go off and leave him to his fine ladies. There were a dozen men crazy about her at the Cheniere, and since it was the fashion to be in love with married people, why, she could run away any time she liked to New Orleans with Selina's husband. Selina's husband was a fool, a coward, and a pig, and to prove it to her, Victor intended to hammer his head into a jelly the next time he encountered him. This assurance was very consoling to Mariquita. She dried her eyes and grew cheerful at the prospect. They were still talking of the dinner and the allurements of city life when Mrs. Pontellier herself slipped around the corner of the house. The two youngsters stayed dumb with amazement before what they considered to be an apparition. But it really was she, in flesh and blood, looking tired and a little travel-stained. "I walked up from the wharf," she said, "and heard the hammering. I supposed it was you, mending the porch. It's a good thing I was always tripping over those loose planks last summer. How dreary and deserted everything looks." It took Victor some little time to comprehend that she had come in Beaudelet's lugger, that she had come alone, and for no purpose but to rest. "There's nothing fixed up yet, you see. I'll give you my room. It's the only place." "Any corner will do," she assured him. "And if you can stand Philomel's cooking," he went on, "though I might try to get her mother while you were here, do you think she would come?" Turning to Mariquita. Mariquita thought that perhaps Philomel's mother might come for a few days, and money enough. Beholding Mrs. Pontellier make her appearance, the girl had at once suspected a lover's rendezvous, but Victor's astonishment was so genuine and Mrs. Pontellier's indifference so apparent that the disturbing notion did not lodge long in her brain. She contemplated with the greatest interest this woman who gave the most sumptuous dinners in America and who had all the men in New Orleans at her feet. "What time will you have dinner?" asked Edna. "I'm very hungry, but don't get anything extra." "I'll have it ready in little or no time," he said, bustling and packing away his tools. "You may go to my room to brush up and rest yourself. Mariquita will show you." "Thank you," said Edna, "but do you know, I have a notion to go down to the beach and take a good wash and even a little swim before dinner." "The water is too cold," they both exclaimed. "Don't think of it." "Well, I might go down and try. Dip my toes in. Why, it seems to me the sun is hot enough to have warmed the very depths of the ocean. Could you get me a couple of towels? I'd better go right away so as to be back in time. It would be a little too chilly if I waited till this afternoon." Mariquita ran over to Victor's room and returned with some towels, which she gave to Edna. "I hope you have fish for dinner," said Edna as she started to walk away. "But don't do anything extra if you haven't." "Run and find Philomel's mother," Victor instructed the girl. "I'll go to the kitchen and see what I can do. By Jiminy, women have no consideration. She might have sent me word." Edna walked on down to the beach rather mechanically, not noticing anything special except that the sun was hot. She was not dwelling upon any particular train of thought. She had done all the thinking which was necessary after Robert went away, when she lay awake upon the sofa till morning. She had said over and over to herself, "Today it is Arobin. Tomorrow it will be someone else. It makes no difference to me. It doesn't matter about Léonce Pontellier, but Raoul and Etienne." She understood now clearly what she had meant long ago when she said to Adèle Ratignolle that she would give up the unessential, but she would never sacrifice herself for her children. Despondency had come upon her there in the wakeful night and had never lifted. There was no one thing in the world that she desired. There was no human being whom she wanted near her except Robert, and she even realized that the day would come when he too, and the thought of him, would melt out of her existence, leaving her alone. The children appeared before her like antagonists who had overcome her, who had overpowered and sought to drag her into the soul's slavery for the rest of her days. But she knew a way to elude them. She was not thinking of these things when she walked down to the beach. The water of the gulf stretched out before her, gleaming with the million lights of the sun. The voice of the sea is seductive, never ceasing, whispering, clamoring, murmuring, inviting the soul to wander in abysses of solitude. All along the white beach, up and down, there was no living thing in sight. A bird with a broken wing was beating the air above, reeling, fluttering, circling, disabled, down, down to the water. Edna had found her old bathing suit still hanging, faded, upon its accustomed peg. She put it on, leaving her clothing in the bathhouse. But when she was there beside the sea, absolutely alone, she cast the unpleasant pricking garments from her, and for the first time in her life she stood naked in the open air, at the mercy of the sun, the breeze that beat upon her, and the waves that invited her. How strange and awful it seemed to stand naked under the sky. How delicious. She felt like some newborn creature opening its eyes in a familiar world that it had never known. The foamy wavelets curled up to her white feet and coiled like serpents about her ankles. She walked out. The water was chill, but she walked on. The water was deep, but she lifted her white body and reached out with a long, sweeping stroke. The touch of the sea is sensuous, enfolding the body in its soft, close embrace. She went on and on. She remembered the night she swam far out and recalled the terror that seized her at the fear of being unable to regain the shore. She did not look back now, but went on and on, thinking of the blue grass meadow that she had traversed when a little child, believing that it had no beginning and no end. Her arms and legs were growing tired. She thought of Léonce and the children. They were a part of her life, but they need not have thought that they could possess her body and soul. How Mademoiselle Reisz would have laughed, perhaps sneered, if she knew. And you call yourself an artist? What pretensions, madame! The artist must possess the courageous soul that dares and defies. Exhaustion was pressing upon and overpowering her. Goodbye, because I love you. He did not know. He did not understand. He would never understand. Perhaps Dr. Mandoulay would have understood if she had seen him, but it was too late. The shore was far behind her, and her strength was gone. She looked into the distance, and the old terror flamed up for an instant, then sank again. Edna heard her father's voice and her sister Margaret's. She heard the barking of an old dog that was chained to the sycamore tree. The spurs of the cavalry officer clanged as he walked across the porch. There was the hum of bees and the musky odor of pinks filled the air. Well, that's a sad one. Despite the sadness, I hope this helps a little bit. And I look forward to seeing you very much when we meet again for the inimitable Jeeves tomorrow at 5. Not at all like this book. This book is beautiful and harrowing. The book tomorrow will just be funny, but both are essential and important. And please, until we see each other next, be very well. Good night.